It is now my honour to introduce Mr. Tom Jenks to collaborate with myself. First slide, please, David. Such is the fame of Tom and I's collaborations that we have been commissioned here tonight to present you with a guide to post-pandemic life. Who commissioned us, Tom?
It was a combination. It was House of Fraser and Grant Shapps.
A school friend of yours.
House of Fraser, yeah.
Fraser. Okay. We might as well just get right into it. Second slide, please, David. When sneezing, always denude your mask in order to expel yourself into your own forearm. The hairs there will absorb the corrosive snot. You should have a good few seconds to do this, and this is known as the Jenks Moment. In one of life's great mysteries, you'll feel the sneeze coming over you, like a monkey who has perceived a nearby flamingo as treasure. And after all, if you don't denude your mask to sneeze, you'll snap your anterior cruciate ligament, as unfortunately happened with Tom, or your head will explode. And then where will all the poetry that your friends and relations love so much come from? Lesson: sneezing in public is now the equivalent of street toileting.
Next slide, please, Dave. Okay, well, hand hygiene obviously remains important. Get yourself a pair of white gloves like these, sort of worn by mime artists and snooker referees. Steve and I spent a year working in the noughties as avant-garde snooker referees. We toured the provinces in the Vauxhall Course, I think it was Vauxhall Course. Our practice became progressively more abstract. We eventually dispensed with the balls, the cues, the table, and also the players. And we only kept the blue chalk which we used to daub one another with whilst we shouted numbers. That caused us to be run out of Halifax, ruining the bingo. Our career as mime artist was a bit more short-lived, unfortunately. We found we had nothing to say to each other. Lesson: 2 wrongs don't make a right, and 2 men can't share a waistcoat.
Next slide, please, David. The noughties were better than now. People kept pets, like dogs, cats, bats, and mice. Before we knew, they were carriers and had to eliminate them all. And mice rhymes with ice, which is nice, which I'm sure you'll all notice, being poets and poetry lovers. At the end of the day, hard decisions have to be made. There are carriers of disease all around us. And by that, I mean mainly in takeaways that you all in Manchester are always in, if not living there permanently. I've been told you hang around there to eat and fight. And by takeaways, I mean a terrible conspiracy that robs you of your freedom or saves your life. Joking aside, mice do have similar virological, immunological, and pathological symptoms to humans, so please do stop crawling through Manchester's alleys. Lesson: it ain't nice to talk to mice without a mask.
Next slide, please, Dave. Right, here we see a temperature being taken. One has to arrive at a specific temperature at which the objects become malleable, said George Braque. He who cannot put his thoughts on ice should not enter into the heated dispute, said Friedrich Nietzsche. Is it hot in here or is it me? Said, of course, Prince Andrew. Temperature was an important issue for Steve and me when we ran our online tortoise sanctuary. We had to give it up in the end, his business was just too slow. Lesson: if you want to boil a frog, don't use a travel kettle.
Next slide, please. Let me set the scene. It's 1995. René Rousseau is at her absolute peak, and Tom has just turned 30 and is the president of her fan club. Dustin Hoffman is dressed as a pygmy marmoset and he's biting everyone. I am 12 and being forced, as a child genius, to lecture on the dangers of bat caves and bushmeat at a conference in Stroud. Morgan Freeman is there. I hadn't remembered that. Kevin Spacey too, but that's not. People say prescience, but I don't see it. The word outbreak was certainly changed forever. Lesson: films are lies and don't travel unless you really have to.
Next slide, please, Dave. Hand washing again. Hand washing is vital when dealing with ectoplasm, as you see here. I'm sure you've noticed there's been an upsurge in paranormal activity since lockdown. I mean, I recently encountered the ghost of Ken Dodd. in the Overspill car park at the Trafford Centre. I know Steve has terrible trouble with Genghis Khan. Steve and I were once surprised on the moors of what we took to be a ghostly talking llama with the face of Andrew Lloyd Webber, but it was only a hallucination brought on by tiredness and too much tofu. Lesson: wearing a cape doesn't make you the Phantom of the Opera.
Next slide, please. A dromedary walks into a bar, it hurts its head. Bat caves are horrific places to visit. I would absolutely not recommend going with Tom on his annual visit to Cheddar Gorge. Though it is historically interesting, he does tend to get peckish, and this man can climb. He has extraordinary grip strength. Moreover, Tom has never liked cooked meat, as you know if you've been in the Eccles Tesco's when he's having his steak tartare. He often sends the waiter back with the aside, "Not bloody enough, pleb." Lesson: in the times we live in, don't take risks with bat meat, even if it's from Somerset, and when the Sainsbury's meal deal still includes the falafel wrap.
There's no Tesco's in Eccles, Steve, sorry. Next slide, please, Dave. What a party this was. Just me, Steve, 3 members of Steps, the Shadow Cabinet, all masked up, drinking vegan oxtail soup through sustainable straws. So Keir Starmer was meant to join us, but he was in his gazebo, listening to Alan Sugar's autobiography on Audible, writing his essays. He loves to write his essays. Come out, we said, we've got a bouncy castle and some Lucozade Sport. I prefer bouncy castles to real castles and carry on wearing a face covering because I don't like people lip reading when I'm eating crisps. Lesson: Alan Sugar is a crime in China.
Next slide, please, Dave. Actually, I don't like that one. If you could go through another one. Not that one. One more? Yeah, perfect. I learned my Pangolin throat singing on a trip east to Norwich, which is a very important poetry city, funding-wise. And it is the equivalent of Ashton-under-Lyne for you lot. Let me tell you, the risk of taking lessons from pangolins is twofold. First, their scales can hide all manner of bacteria. They are essentially an armoured rat, after all, and they do like to rub themselves across your mouth and nose when they're itchy. The second risk, they are so physically attractive as to make Tom Jenks look like Bernard Manning, who I understand is a hero to many up here. Lesson: Pangolinging is a dangerous poetry even without a global pandemic.
Next slide, please, Dave. This is an activity I devised myself, Paris Virtual Icebreaker, one of my post-pandemic pre-working breakfast wellness sessions in my Portakabin come multi-sensory thought space. Although it can also be done online. I often meet friends and family members online for fun online activities. I've got my virtual sushi bar with downloadable horseradish. And sometimes my poetry reading group, which I host on MySpace. Slightly, you might think most poets are actually quite technologically savvy and think nothing of, say, like changing their ringtone or even burning a CD. Some of them even know how to drive. Lesson: don't let a poet into your glove compartment.
Next slide, please, Dave. Big Van Vader, the Bane impersonator, is carried upon the shoulder of Tom from town to town to show people how and why to wear their mask in confined spaces, like in the Portakabin multi-sensory thought space that Tom referred to before. In a way, this dog is a little bit like a scaleless pangolin, or a furry poet, or a thoughtful Tom Jenks. A little known fact: Tom made this mask for his dog, Big Van Vader, out of an old pair of white ones. He had bought them from a Woolworths in Sunderland back before you and I were born. He cut the nose hole out so the dog could breathe freely, as I've seen many people doing here in Manchester today. Lesson: pets aren't toys, they're our children.
Next slide, please, Dave. When all else fails, of course, there's always drugs. Steve and I always share a junior discipline backstage before reading. Sometimes even a syringe of Calpol, like Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Thomas de Quincey were the TV chefs. I build up resistance to infection by going wild river swimming, as seen in the Observer magazine. If my schedule's too busy, I just sit in the bath with some twigs and leaves and hire a farmer to shout obscenities through the bathroom window. I had a rubber duck, but it died, like my rocking horse. Lesson, a fish always rots from the head down, except when it's battered.
Thank you so much. A 10-minute intermission, which I'm sure you all need. Please do return. Thank you.